tuning in this morning. One of the things that's been hard about all of this, among so many things, is just not being out and seeing people and talking about lots of the things that are going on. You know, I have the privilege of coming to the Senior Center in North Reading often, and usually I'm fortunate enough to have Chief Murphy with me, who may be joining us at some point. He had something to do this morning, but you know, he is been just a great partner. He always is a great partner, but particularly around getting us organized for what has befallen all of us. And in one of those things that certainly wasn't planned with respect to the pandemic, but has served us really well, right after the holidays in Middlesex County, we brought together all of our chiefs as well as the sheriff and really just said, you know, we have been fortunate. It's been a long time since we've had something that's really been all-encompassing, something like the marathon bombing or that sort of thing. And we really need to update a lot of our procedures and think about how would we respond if there were some kind of a massive event. And we've begun doing that. We've been meeting a number of times, kind of going through things, thinking about it. And that has just paid enormous dividends for us during this pandemic. We certainly didn't anticipate that would be what it was. But what I hope you've seen in your communities is really the public service response has been pretty seamless. The police, fire, ambulances have done a great job in terms of just figuring out how to keep themselves safe, at the same time making sure we're responding to things that happen, and also really around prioritizing. You know, there are some things that, and I'm sure you've heard about this, you know, there's been some things that they've sort of been responding less to, kind of some of the minor things that have given them more time to be responding to people's health needs, all of the kinds of services we've needed through this. So I just want to take a second to acknowledge that, because I think when things are going well, we don't always think about how fortunate we are. And we are really very, very fortunate in this county in terms of our partnerships and in terms of how things have been working. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge something that I'm sure many of you have had some connection to, and you heard Laura mention that I live in Belmont, and we've had the same thing in our community, and I think it's made a big difference. I know that North Reading, according to the Department of Public Health, has had 165 cases, reported cases anyway, of the virus itself, and many of those have been connected to Royal Meadowview, the nursing and rehab center. And unfortunately, a fair number of people have succumbed to the virus there. And here in Belmont, we've had the same thing. The Belmont Manor Nursing Home, place that's been here for a long time, family-owned place, had an enormous outbreak of the virus. A number of people have lost their lives. It's hard really to find anybody in town who isn't somehow directly impacted by that. And I think that it influences what I want to talk about today in a couple of ways. And the first is just kind of talking about how we're all feeling socially distanced and sometimes kind of isolated as a result of all of that, both because of what it means in terms of how people are doing, surviving all of this. And then also when I talk a little bit about some of the ways that our friends, the scammers, have found to profit from this, it also has an impact on that as well. And, you know, Laura mentioned my husband and kids are fortunately all tucked in different parts of the house, Zooming away. So that's a good thing. But I think one of the things that we have really been stressing to people is that while we have to be distant, we certainly can stay connected. I mean, as all of you are witness to today, it's pretty amazing. It would have been pretty amazing even a couple of years ago to think of being able to do this kind of a program with you all kind of settled in your own house and being able to call in and ask questions and watch the program. But it's really meant a change for us in terms of thinking about how do we look at people in our society, particularly those who are vulnerable. And I really include a pretty broad range there, whether it's kids, whether it's people who may be in violent relationships, whether it's people struggling with addiction, with mental health issues, or people who just really are pretty far from their own families or people to check on them. And how do we make sure that we're doing some checking with people? And I'll give you one good example. We unfortunately, we get every week a number of reports of suspicion of abuse or neglect of kids. And there are whole categories of people across society that are required to report their suspicions. Probably the two biggest groups that are required to do it and do make those reports are school teachers and medical personnel. Well, pretty much kids aren't seeing either of those. If they're seeing their school folks, they're doing it remotely, and lots of kids are not seeing their medical providers, or at best they might be doing a telehealth kind of appointment. So the question really became, yeah, our reports are down. They went down very dramatically when this started, which might be a good thing, except we knew in this case it probably just meant that things were happening, especially if you think about if the abuser is somebody in the family, you're now in the house with them all the time, and you've got all kinds of stressors going on, maybe loss of job, just everybody trying to be in the house, trying to homeschool, trying to do all of that. So it wasn't a good thing that we weren't getting those, and those kids weren't seeing those people. So what we've done is we've taken our training for people to make observations and how to report, and we've been pushing that out to the people who are seeing kids. For instance, most cities and towns are doing a really good job about getting breakfast or lunch to the kids. The people handing out those breakfasts and lunch that are seeing the kids, they're not used to making those reports, so we've gotten that training out to them. We've been getting it out to people at food pantries because they are seeing lots of families now. So that's one piece. The second is, for people who might find themselves in a violent relationship, but now they're in the house with that person, we've created in our office a text line where from 8:30 to 5 every day, if somebody wants to text rather than trying to make a phone call when their abuser might be right in the house, they can actually speak to one of our advocates who can help them make a safety plan. For people who are struggling with some kind of addiction, whether it's alcohol or some other substance, we've created a whole set of resources that are on our website there are a lot of virtual meetings. There are people and really volunteers who are bravely still willing to take people to treatment if they need that. So we want people to connect with that. And then also people who might be struggling with some mental health issues. For them, as with most people with mental health issues, any change in the routine is hard. This is certainly a dramatic change in our routine. So we want people to be keeping a watchful eye out. And, that's one of the things I know the folks that I've seen when I come to the center, I always ask you as people who are here and involved in the conversations to not only learn from it yourself, but hopefully take this information back. I'm sure you all know some people that either family or friends or whatever that you will be talking to over the next few days to spread that information. Think about people that you haven't seen. I think probably the best example of this, you might have seen this on the news the other day, was a little boy living in a big apartment, big townhouse kind of development. 3-year-old little boy had become very friendly with an older woman who lived by herself a few townhouses down. And he and his mother were out walking. Obviously, they hadn't been visiting with her because of the social distance piece, but kind of waving from the porches and that sort of thing very safely. And he and his mother were out walking. And at some point, he said to his mother, there are 3 newspapers on her front porch. And the mother looked, and sure enough, there were 3 of the newspapers piled up on the porch. She made a phone call to the woman, couldn't reach her. They tried ringing the doorbell, couldn't reach her. Ultimately called the police, who gained admission to the house. And sometimes these have a terribly sad ending, obviously, but what they discovered was the people had units in the basement, kind of locked storage units. And this poor woman had unfortunately gone downstairs to retrieve something out of the storage unit. And while she was in there, the door shut behind her, locking her in the storage unit. And she had been in there for 2.5 days. And it was really that little boy just seeing the newspapers out there that alerted somebody. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to encourage people to be doing is you can be socially distant and still, make a phone call to somebody, send an email, even drop off a note in their mailbox. I live in a kind of tiny little neighborhood and lots of folks who live alone that we all sort of keep an eye out. And I know we've all been kind of just dropping off like a muffin or leaving little notes or doing things so you can kind of make sure that everybody's in there. And the other thing I think is just really, and I think this is true because I see it here in Belmont. I think when the places that the virus has hit particularly hard, everybody's stressed about what happened. You're totally off your normal routine. We're probably not getting as much accomplished. I keep joking with my friends that for years I have said about so many things in my house and life things. If I only had time, I'd get these things done. Well, I think after 8 weeks, it's pretty clear that time is not the only issue because those things aren't done. So, and I'm sure that's true for everybody. And that one of the things is, I think everybody is so on edge, especially when you've seen it up close like you have in North Reading, that even going to the grocery store or going to the drugstore or whatever, even if you're doing all the right things, you've got the mask on, you're staying 6 feet away, people are just so on edge. And understandably, and I think it's really being able to acknowledge to yourself how stressful this is. You've probably seen all the reports about how crazy people's dreams are because there's just a lot of stress that we're not processing. And just being kind to people outside. The best example probably this week probably being the 17-year-old little girl at the ice cream stand at the Cape who was screamed at pretty unmercifully, enough so that she would quit her job by people who couldn't get their ice cream fast enough. So I think it's really important for everybody to be thinking about how much stress you're under, what we really are enduring, and showing that kindness to yourself. One of the things that's been a concern for us is we have seen increase over the last few weeks of people, and it tends to be people who are very disconnected, being so upset that they've hurt themselves, taken their own lives. So that's obviously always a concern for us and really just encourages us to ask people to just keep an eye out, to make a reach out, make that phone call that might really make a difference. It also plays into what I want to talk about a little bit about some of the scams. Unfortunately, every time something happens like this pandemic, it seems to take about 5 minutes before people realize how they can make money from that. And one of the things that's problematic about that is, and I know if I seen you at the senior center, I always say this, if when we are all together, somebody were to make the pitch to you that a scammer is making, you'd probably look at each other and maybe roll your eyes a little bit or say that doesn't seem right, and you wouldn't be taken in by that. Those kinds of scams really thrive either in isolation when people don't have somebody to bounce something off of, when people are lonely, and really just talking to anybody seems like a good idea as opposed to being by themselves. And in particular, with respect to this issue, the pandemic, where people are so frightened, we've really seen sort of 3 kinds of scams that have popped up all over the place. One has had to do with finances in terms of particularly around the stimulus check that people got. People reporting to us lots of phone calls or emails, saying either they are from the federal government and they are somehow confirming or making sure you're going to get your stimulus check. And in order to do that, wanting your social security number or your bank routing number or some such thing. Just to be really clear, there is no federal agency that's going to contact you about that stimulus check. The stimulus check is either going to go directly into your bank account if you have used your bank information in filing your taxes in the past. And if you have not, if you've actually sent a check to do taxes or had a check come to you, then it's going to come to you the same way as your tax return. You're just going to get that check in the mail automatically. But especially for people who might be feeling the pinch a little bit financially right now, they're looking forward to getting that $1,200 or so check, and they might very quickly answer those questions. So that is absolutely not going to happen, nor is any bank going to reach out to get information. Either the check is going to just arrive in your bank account or it's not. The bank doesn't need to get anything at all from you about that. So if you get that kind of a call, I absolutely promise you that that is a scam. And not responding to it is not in any way going to affect your getting or not getting the check. The second piece has really been around sort of taking advantage of people's concern either about testing or about getting medication. We have gotten lots and lots of reports of people getting either door-to-door or phone calls saying that they have an opportunity to get a test. There is no publicly available at-home test for the virus. There just is not. So anybody who tells you they can sell you one, or they can mail you one, or they can do whatever, that's just a scam. The other is that they've got some kind of supplement or vitamin or something that's going to protect you from that. Again, if you've been sort of following the scientists around this, there is no confirmed treatment at this point. There certainly is no confirmed preventative medication. There's no vaccine, so no one can be selling you any of that. And those calls are really kind of piling up. And then the third is, and this I always think is the worst because it really takes advantage of people's good nature, are the solicitations for some kind of charitable donation to help with people in your community, or maybe people at the nursing home, or whatever it is about that. If you want to give some money, that should be driven by you. Either you should pick out a charity you've used in the past, something local, which I'm sure you can call the police department, you can call the senior center, you know, the food pantry, whatever it is that they might be in town that you're interested in supporting, or going to a website of a reputable charity, obviously, you know, the Red Cross or Dana-Farber or Mass General or whatever it is that you might be interested in giving to. It is never a good idea to give in response to a solicitation. And remember also what people often use to take advantage of that is they take a very reputable charity and use some combinations of words that are kind of like what that charity is. So for instance, the American Cancer Fund, you know, people very familiar with that think that's a great organization. Well, you probably get about 18 calls a week from organizations that have those words in the name but are not that. So the, you know, the Cancer Organization of America is a fake charity. You know, and there's sort of a whole litany of those, particularly around veterans, because of the things that have happened at the Holyoke Veterans Home in Chelsea. There's been a real increase of veterans calls. You know, people want to help veterans, should help veterans. Hundreds of calls, you know, sort of like the VFW, but not quite the VFW. And so the money that you're intending to really do some good for people is actually going nowhere, except into somebody's pocket. The other is the people who are sending out, and it may very well look like an email from someone you know, suddenly announcing that somebody in their family has come down with the virus, has succumbed to the virus, and they're needing to collect some money, raise some money for medical expenses, funeral expenses, that kind of thing. And all it takes is the change. If you've ever noticed when you're trying to send an email, putting in or taking out a period or a hash or a slash or something completely changes where something's going. So you get an email, it looks like somebody you know, you're of course completely surprised and saddened to see that they've got somebody in their family who's suffering from the virus, and your first thought is, of course, you want to respond. And in fact, that's not at all who you're responding to. And kind of related back to the financial piece, the other thing is people have been getting all kinds of solicitations about, there's been obviously an enormous impact on the stock market, on business. So you, particularly if you have a brokerage account, if you have some investments, that sort of thing. It's pretty easy for people to see you on a list somewhere to get your information, and you suddenly get something that says, you know, as you know, the stock market has taken a 400-point dip yesterday. We can help you reinvest. We can help you remortgage. There are a lot of mortgage scams that are out there right now. If you need some cash, you can do a reverse mortgage, all kinds of things. Again, they're approaching you. You should assume that there is a pretty high likelihood that those are not really your best choice. If in fact you do think you want to diversify your investments or mortgage your house or do whatever it is, you should initiate that and initiate it with people you trust, people that you vet in terms of whether they are reputable. So that kind of piece is all connected to the virus. The other piece, and this is a continuing scam, and it's a very, very lucrative scam, and it's one that we all tend to ignore. And for somebody who's got them going, they literally are making millions of dollars on it. And it really has to do with your health profile. And remember, people obviously are worried about their health, so it's a good time when people might be more responsive to some of these. And it works really one of two ways. One is that you either online or on the phone, tends to be the way this happens. People contact you, and one of two things: either offer you the opportunity to participate in some kind of a survey or a study. So for instance, we've probably all seen, and we're being encouraged, if you get a call that says it's from the mass COVID team, they're asking that you answer that call, that is a call to tell you that somebody you've been in contact with has been infected with the virus. So we do want you to answer that so we can track it. But because people have that in their head, they've watched that, they've heard that, you get a call. Now, maybe you didn't quite look at the number when you picked it up, or you don't remember exactly what they said the number was going to be. And the call is something about, we're trying to track things about the virus. We're trying to figure out the question about whether you are prone to the virus or not. And they ask you some questions. You know, have you ever had a heart attack? Have you ever suffered from cancer? Have you ever had a knee or a hip replacement? Questions. They're not asking you a lot of background information, and they might be pretty vague about that. It might be, you know, are you between 50 and 70 or 70 and 90? Not pinning you down. So it sort of seems okay, because you're not saying, this is Marian Ryan and I'm this age and I have these issues. They go through and they ask you that series of questions. The other form that it sometimes takes is around the DNA testing, the 23andMe. You'll get a call saying that you have somehow become eligible for a free DNA test. And everybody watches those commercials, and it looks kind of fun, and they'll tell you which part of Ireland or Italy or someplace your relatives are from, and you can tell your grandchildren, and it'll be great, and it's free, and the test, which now costs somewhere between $50 and $100, you're going to get it for free if you just answer these questions. People answer the questions, and in fact, you may well get the test. So you think, questions, I got this test. What they are doing is they want to find out what kind of medical procedures you've had. Because the way it works is this: if you, suppose you were legitimately having your hip replaced, you would have seen your orthopedist or the surgeon. They probably got pre-approval from Medicare or your insurance company that they are going to pay for that procedure. And the insurance company, whoever it is, knows somebody's having their hip replaced. They're going to be paying the surgeon, the anesthesiologist, they're going to pay the hospital. You're probably going to go to rehab. Maybe you need a walker, maybe you need a brace. So the insurance company is prepared for an array of expenses that fit a condition that they know you have. What they aren't realizing, and they're not always as careful about checking, and we often are really unwitting participants in it. You know, when you get your bill from a doctor or a rehab or something, and it says this is not a bill. So most of us, I know I do, I look at it, I think, okay, not a bill, not a problem. This is just confirmation that some provider billed my insurance company. I may throw that away. What you really need to do is look at that form. Make sure that the provider that is on there is somebody you actually saw. You actually saw them at the time it indicates you saw them, and you got the service that it says you got. Because what happens is some unscrupulous scammer, you've been seeing Mary Smith as your physical therapist, and you saw her 8 times between January and March. Well, so and the insurance company was kind of on the routine of, okay, you were going to physical therapy 3 times a week and they're paying and it's all fine. Well, now you get a form indicating that Joan Smith has now sent something saying that she provided rehab services in the month of, if we hadn't been quarantined, in the month of April. You didn't get any services from her, first of all, you don't know who she is, and you didn't get any rehab services during the month of April. The insurance company, given the enormous number of claims that they're paying, doesn't necessarily say, gee, she was only going to get 4 weeks of physical therapy, nor do we want them to, right? If you were supposed to get 4 weeks of physical therapy and legitimately your physical therapist said you needed 2 more, we want the insurance company without too much of a hassle to pay that. So when they see another 4 weeks, pretty much what's going to happen is they're going to pay Joan for that service that she never provided. So it is estimated that several $1 billion a year is being paid out, because what they're looking to get, it's not like just getting your credit card in sort of a one-time deal. They're looking to get your health profile. You have previously been treated for certain things, so that when your insurance company sees that, they say, oh yes, she was supposed to have a hip replacement. Or, oh yes, last year she had cancer and now here's a bill from a radiologist. Something must have come back. These are all related and they're paying for them. And the reality is, you might think, well, that's too bad. The insurance company should be more careful and they shouldn't be paying them. That is true, but they aren't, and they do pay. And what happens is we end up paying for that because that cost is all coming back on us. So that's something that people don't realize. Your health profile is worth so much more than your credit card, because your credit card at some point, probably pretty quickly, especially if you realize something's happened with it, you're going to report it and it's going to get shut off. That health profile can keep on giving for a really long time. And if you've ever actually looked at your real medical bills, what you can bill for is pretty exorbitant. So lots of money can be going pretty quickly on those bills. The other thing that's, and this is a little bit, it happens all the time, but it's a little bit more prevalent in this situation, is the calls that people are getting from what appear to be government agencies. So for instance, you might get a call, and both the sheriff and our office have spoken about this, because you get a call and it looks like it's the sheriff's department calling you. It looks like it's the jury commissioner. It looks like it's the district attorney's office. Trust me, we're not calling you. But the call is either something has happened, some information has been compromised, please type in this information, or you've been summoned for jury duty, you didn't come, there's a fine that you need to pay right away. Go to CVS and buy us some kind of a gift card or green dot card. Keep in mind, no legitimate business is taking payment in gift cards. So and I really just can't say this often enough and try to get the word out to people. Anybody who asks you for a gift card is a scam. There's just no one who's taking their payment in that. Certainly not government agencies. If you miss jury duty, you can't buy your way out of that with gift cards. And yet that continues to be something that's going. It's also the case, and I think it's really in some ways a testament to how much we spread the word. You know, people are pretty careful now about if someone called you up and said, give me your social security number, you're probably enough on guard that you're not going to do that. So the way that the scammers have changed the call a great deal to be successful is they say, I'm confirming that your social security number is. Think about how many times you've said your social security number over your life. You hear some combination of numbers that they start rattling off that's sort of close to your social security number. And remember, your social security number is really only unique in the last 4 numbers. The first 3 numbers have to do with where you were born. The middle numbers have to do with the years. They're a logarithm for the year that you were born. And the last 4 numbers are really all that's unique. So, you know, in this crowd, I could probably make a fair assumption that a high percentage of you might have been born in Massachusetts. And I probably could get in the ballpark of age. So I could, with pretty good accuracy, give something pretty close in those first 5 numbers. And you know, if you sort of doubt this, think about it yourself. Somebody starts rattling off a number that sounds just like what you do, and you almost unconsciously will give them the last 4 numbers. So that's just a way the scammers have gotten just a little bit more sophisticated in terms of developing that piece. So again, the things that I really want to stress are both the services that are still out there that are available, the really ask that we are making of people to keep an eye on folks, even though you can't physically be with them, in terms of reaching out, to think about for yourself, first of all, both how stressful this actually is, and the fact that you're feeling kind of at loose ends or stressed is a perfectly normal reaction. And that if you really think that this is affecting you more than that, you know, there's lots of help. You should reach out to your primary care provider or to somebody for services. We've got lots of resources on our website. I know we sent out some of those. And then with respect to all of the regular scams that are out there, the sort of spring home repair scams, you know, we can do your driveway, we can cut trees, all of those things. As I say all the time, you are making a contract when you do that. And in the same way that you didn't make a contract when you bought a house or when you buy a car, kind of on the front steps or quickly over the phone, you shouldn't be making those contracts that way either. You should, first of all, have thought about, just as if you're going out to buy a car, you think about what you want, how much you can afford to spend, what the features are. You should have thought about what it was that you needed to have done, what your sort of range was of what you could spend for that, and then find somebody to do that. That's the same way you should approach it. And if you have as your standard line, I don't ever make contracts on the phone or on my front steps. It's a great thing, because then no matter who approaches you, you can perfectly nicely say, I'm so sorry, I don't make contracts on the front steps. Happy to look at what you have and move on. Same thing on the telephone. I don't enter into contracts on the telephone, and move on. You can send me whatever. I can virtually guarantee you, you won't ever see anything from them, because scammers, and again, in some ways it helps to think about what it is that they're doing. Their goal is to part you from your possessions as quickly as possible, because it's a volume business, and fly under the radar. So to the extent you make it difficult for them, or want them to call back, or want them to send you something, unfortunately, there's lots of other phone numbers they can call, and they will move on to trying to scam someone else rather than wasting a lot of time talking to you about it. So, and then with respect to the particular kinds of things, anything having to do with asking you about your finances, your bank accounts, your investments, your social security number, any of that in connection with the pandemic, with the stimulus checks. There's supposedly going to be another round of stimulus checks, so we'll have another whole set of these questions. Absolutely a scam. Excuse me. Anybody offering to sell you some kind of medical prevention, it just doesn't exist, so they can't be selling it. Absolutely a scam. And then people asking you to be generous to those people who've been impacted by the pandemic. It coming from a stranger on the phone in an email, there is probably a 98% chance that that is a total scam and that your dollars will be going to them, not to anybody who's been affected by the virus. So I know that's a lot of information, but I want to give people a chance to ask questions. So Laura, I'm not sure if you are going to control the hand raising and all of that, but I switch back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marian. That was such helpful information. I learned a lot that I was not aware of, so I'm very happy that we had you here. The way, for those of you who have joined in after we started, I'm happy to have you here as well. The way we have it set up is to protect your name and your faces as we're recording this. So you can ask a question, if you have any, for the district attorney by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking the chat button. It should prompt you to, quote, raise your hand. I will get a notification if and when you do that, and I can unmute you so you can ask your question to the district attorney. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to virtually, the way of 2020, raise your hand.
Everybody's very quiet. If anybody's got questions, got any suggestions too about getting all those closets cleaned and things planted and all the things that everybody was going to do during this time, that's great too.
Absolutely. What a nod to you, Marian, if there are no questions.
They're just overwhelmed by information. Anybody, I mean, I guess I would be interested to know too, if people have been approached by any of those folks or heard about anybody getting approached. I know when I come out to the senior center, people are usually kind of a fountain of information of sort of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I don't have any hand raising. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's anything that people wish we had or have heard people are looking for, or that we might be able to point you in the right direction for?
Oh, I have a question here for you.
Okay.
Is there a unique way people can show people are at home and safe?
So I think this is what you're talking about. We have heard about a lot of neighborhoods where people have developed their own little system of, you know, for instance, I have something in the window, a little sign, or maybe some of you have seen people are putting the teddy bears in the windows, kind of scavenger hunt for kids. And, you know, if my sign is turned over on the blue side in the morning, I'm up and everything is fine. And before I go to bed, I turn it the other way. So you know that, and people can kind of access whether or not the person is safe and when they last were safe. So that if I go by your house at 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night and whatever we've agreed to, and the sign isn't changed, I'll be concerned. If at noontime the next day I see that the sign hasn't been turned from the night time, hopefully you just forgot, but otherwise I'll check on you. And it also, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, it's also a good time to just really be thinking about, and I know we're happy to get some more too, but we've provided folks with files of life and all of that. You know, that little magnetic sort of history of what your medications are and who your contacts are that you can leave on the refrigerator. Especially right now when our first responders have been really, really busy, that really has been a lifeline for people. You know, if they come in your house, the the ambulance and fire department are trained to look on the front of your refrigerator for that. If they can grab it on the way out the door, it's very helpful to the hospital. And also, if you haven't been able to make a call to your family, one of the things that breaks my heart all the time is when we have people and we just can't reach whoever their next of kin is. And all of that information goes in there. And the ones that we give to you also have the little one that you can put in your pocket. So everybody's out walking. If you should fall down or have a car accident or something, and we're not at your refrigerator, you can have that little file of life in your pocket. They make such a difference in the emergency room.
That's very helpful. And like you had mentioned, I know I'm familiar with the people placing a magnet on their fridge with all of that information. Well, how great to have that on hand, so when you get to the emergency room, you have that information too. Wonderful.
Yeah, we had lots of people, unfortunately, who would go out for a walk and just take a fall. And, somebody would come and we'd get them to the emergency room, but of course we didn't know where you were, so we didn't go back to your house.
Right.
So this was a way to have it in your pocket.
Wonderful. A couple more questions came in. One says, I have been getting a lot of email scams lately. I try to check the email sender's address when I'm looking at it. Is there a safer way to protect your email account?
No, not really. I mean, it's the kind of thing we probably all do so much ordering and all those enrolling in things that we give out our email. It's become just like your phone number. People buy the lists. My sort of rule of thumb is if I don't know who it is, I don't get involved with it. And if I think that it is somebody I know, and it seems like an unusual kind of request, particularly if it's a money request. Even if you think it's your granddaughter or whoever, and there's something in there, but I would email the address. Don't reply to that email, but email the address you have for that person and see if that's who sent it to you.
Great. One more came in via text, and then we do have a hand raised. So the one via text, how can you stop solicitation in the mail? Is there any way to stop mail solicitation?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all. And one of the other things that people should be thinking about, there really isn't, because sometimes people buy just a neighborhood list of addresses, so they're just going to hit you randomly. Those are the ones you get that say occupant at 8 Bradford Road, whatever it is. So there's really no way to stop that. And again, every time you get a magazine or sign up for anything, you're giving out your address. So people have that. The other thing that people should be really careful about, and I know I tell this story a lot because it was really very frightening to me. At some point, my father was going to be with us, and we were having his mail sent to my house. And I had never done that before. And he was not well enough to go himself to the post office. So I went to the post office to send that mail to me. And this is the federal post office, right? It's federal offense to tamper with people's mail. So I thought, I'm going in, I'm not him. I'm asking them to take all of his mail and send it from his mailbox to my house. So I went with every possible document I could think of, my DAID, my, something showing that I actually lived where I lived. I had a birth certificate. I had everything that I thought I was going to need to show them who I was and that I was authorized to get the mail. If you have never done that, it's really kind of worth doing to see how ridiculous it is. You go, they give you a postcard, you fill in the old address, the new address, you sign your name, and at the bottom in print that is about maybe that big, it says that you are agreeing that you're not doing that for an unlawful purpose. And if you're a scammer, that's not slowing you down. And I handed that to the mail person, and presto, his mail was coming to my house.
Wow.
So if for some reason, and this happens all the time, we will have somebody who will suddenly report that they've noticed either that their credit card bills are astronomical, or that over a period of time, their bank account has gone from a very comfortable balance to pretty much zero. And so my question used to always be, well, how come you didn't notice as it was going down month by month, or as the credit card bill was going up and up? And what people would always say to me was, now that I think of it, I haven't gotten my credit card bill, or I haven't gotten my bank statement. And we don't all sit around every day thinking, gee, did I get that statement? Most of us have a bunch of those we get. So it's nice, it's annoying to get solicitations, but if you realize that you are not getting mail, make sure you call the post office, because particularly where we see it is either a family member suddenly starts sending the mail to their house. If you've had some help in the house, often that person is very capably moved those statements off to their own address. And it is so, so easy to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. That's great information. One more question here. Governor Baker says we should wear masks if we cannot social distance. As of May 6th, we were told to wear masks all of the time when outdoors. What is the correct thing to do?
I think the governor probably gave the best example when he said, when I look outside at 5:30 in the morning and there's really nobody out there and somebody's running down the middle of my street completely by themselves, they probably don't need to be wearing the mask. At 11 o'clock in the morning when everybody's out walking, you certainly do. I mean, I know, for instance, I think what most people are doing, which I guess is the reasonable thing, I take my dog out to walk on the trail, there's nobody out there, but I've got my mask in my hand. And it really, especially if you think about it's sort of just courtesy. The mask is to protect everybody else. I don't want anybody else to be uncomfortable coming near me. So I've got the mask in my hand. If I see somebody coming towards me, I just put the mask on. I mean, I think that whole mask etiquette has been a little bit complicated.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's very, very helpful. We'll let this be the last question before we sign everyone off. We have one more, Marian. Why is Governor Baker holding off on letting people know about what businesses are allowed to open in his 4-phase reopening plan? Why does he not just tell us so people can plan?
So that's a question I've been having every day as I try to think about reopening our 13 locations and our 250 employees. I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, I can't speak for the governor, obviously, but I think there's a few reasons. I think that we are all getting a lot of conflicting information about exactly what you have to do. So for instance, I know for us, as we try to reopen, we are probably going to have people sort of working alternate times and all of that. And one of the big questions is how much time has to lapse before the virus has died if it's on a surface. I don't want somebody to come in right behind somebody else. And there's just a huge amount of information that is very, very different. So there's that piece. Excuse me. I think the other piece is the real concern around looking at where the numbers are going. For instance, if you saw yesterday, there were allegedly in the beginning of the day, only 33 reported deaths, which seemed just such a dramatic decline and such a great thing. By later in the day, it was actually, no, that's absolutely not right. There was sort of a miscalculation of whatever happened. So I think people are waiting for more information. The other piece, the very practical piece, I think, is a lot of people are trying to figure out, if you say you've got to be in masks and gloves and all of that, do we really have all that equipment, and can we get it in place in time? If you're going to need plexiglass petitions or whatever, can we get that all done? So I think there's just a lot of, as frustrating as it is, there's just a lot of moving pieces.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording, so I'm going to take myself off video just to give you a big